Thank you very much once again. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to introduce our next speaker, Ms. Lindsay Jolly, Senior Consultant ISO, in order to delve into the crucial topic of green hydrogen prospects and challenges. Ms. Lindsay Jolly is a distinguished commodity analyst specializing in global sugar markets, serving as a consultant to the International Sugar Organization. With over 20 years of experience at ISO in London and previous roles at Australian Bureau of Agricultural and Resource Economics in Canberra and Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in Rome, he focuses on economic research in primary commodity markets. Ms. Lindsay advocates for diversification and renewable bioenergy pathways within the sugar industry, contributing through publications and speaking engagements worldwide. Let's welcome Mr. Lindsay Jolly on the dais.
Good morning, one and all. It's an absolute pleasure to be here in India and at this very important meeting. I thought the panel was excellent, very excellent, and I think it sets up nicely my little talk about green hydrogen, which is a little further in the distance, but it's a real opportunity for the sugar industry, and it's a real necessity for the global economy to move down that decarbonisation path. Today I'm going to be talking about green hydrogen. It's the holy grail of all hydrogens when it comes to climate activists and the energy sector and governments. It's the only hydrogen that does not emit carbon dioxide when you use it. So hydrogen is unique amongst liquid and gaseous fuels in that it emits absolutely no CO2 emissions when the energy is released as heat through combustion or as electricity in a fuel cell. In both cases, the only other input needed is oxygen, and the only byproduct is water. But most hydrogen today is produced using natural gas or methane, and that emits significant greenhouse gases as a result. So while hydrogen is very much seen as the Swiss army knife of the energy world, it potentially can be used absolutely everywhere. It only becomes a game changer in the globe's transition to a low carbon economy if it can be produced with low or no CO2 emissions. And that is where green hydrogen fits in. There is no generation of CO2 when it is produced. Hydrogen may be a small molecule, but it's hugely important when it comes to decarbonising transport and industry. Hydrogen is a Swiss army knife because it is so versatile and can be used across a vast range of applications. It can be used in transport, in buildings, in power generation, in industrial processes, and more. But today I haven't really got time to go through all of those precise uses. I want to focus initially on how is hydrogen made. This is the hydrogen colour spectrum. There is an expanding range of techniques to produce hydrogen, each referred to by a different colour. It makes life simple to have a different colour for those hydrogens that use different feedstocks and each with a higher or lower CO2 emission. Black and brown hydrogen present the traditional way to make hydrogen using black or brown coal. It is very bad in the sense of releasing lots of CO2. Grey hydrogen is derived from natural gas. It's the most common production method today, accounting for around 60% of all hydrogen that is produced. It generates lower CO2 emissions than black or brown. Blue hydrogen involves steam reforming of natural gas, but then capturing the CO2 emissions. And that CO2 can be stored or used in applications. So it's a lower clean hydrogen. Beyond black, brown, grey and blue, there are another 8 shades of hydrogen: turquoise, purple, pink, red, yellow, white, and then there's green hydrogen. In this slide, I try to capture which are seen as the clean hydrogens at the moment. Only a few qualify, as you can see there. Obviously, green hydrogen is the new gold standard for hydrogen production. And then, of course, you have blue hydrogen, where the CO2 emitted from natural gas is captured and used. And then I introduce a turquoise hydrogen, where natural gas is used under a different technology, pyrolysis. Pyrolysis allows the carbon in natural gas to be captured in solid form, so it doesn't get emitted into the atmosphere. And then there is the biomass-derived hydrogen, which is the important one for the sugar industry. If you're producing a biomethane, obviously you can produce a hydrogen that is carbon neutral or even carbon negative. Green hydrogen is produced with no CO2 emissions from renewable sources of electricity, such as wind, hydro, and solar, and then an electrolyzer is used to break water into hydrogen and oxygen in a process called electrolysis. That's the most basic and only way to make green ethanol. There are different types of electrolyzers. The alkaline one is the most common, but maybe for green ethanol with a more variable renewable power supply, it's better suited for that circumstance, the PEM electrolyzer. Sorry, there's the screen there, sorry. There's the three types of electrolyzers. Saudi Arabia is currently building the world's largest green hydrogen project. It's a joint venture. It is going to need about 4 gigawatts of solar and wind energy to produce 600 tons of hydrogen every day, of green hydrogen. That development is costing around $8.5 billion US dollars. It's a big investment. Once produced, that green hydrogen will be made into green ammonia because it's going to be far easier to handle. And I'll come back to how you can convert hydrogen into a different substance for distribution and storage. I just quickly want to emphasize again blue hydrogen and the importance of the carbon capture, use and storage technique. Because blue hydrogen is about the only hydrogen that can be scalable and easily meet a clean hydrogen mandate. So it's important to know that as green hydrogen capacity is developed, you really are going to be developing alongside the blue hydrogen production from natural gas. Looking now a bit at the size of the hydrogen usage, according to the International Energy Agency, the world used about 95 million tons of hydrogen in 2022. That's around 3% of the world's energy use, and it's similar in size to what Germany would use in a single year. Of that H2 use, only 0.1% was green hydrogen. You'll also see here that there's a scenario for 2030 under the IEA's net zero emissions scenario. And it shows that by 2030, the world should be using around 150 million tons of hydrogen. And you can see that there are some new uses for hydrogen by 2030. Presently, you see use in refining and in industry, but in 2030, you see use in transport, synthetic fuels, and the power sector. Flip the coin to the production side. Well, it will obviously match at 95 million tons, but production was dominated by the unabated use of fossil fuels. Natural gas without carbon capture accounted for around 60% of production, while use of coal, mainly in China, accounted for around 21% of production. And then you have the remaining 16% produced as a byproduct of industrial processes in oil refining and in petrochemical industry. In terms of cleaner hydrogen, production was less than 1 million tonnes in 2022, and that was entirely blue hydrogen. Production of green hydrogen was around 100 kilotonnes, and that's how you get that 0.1% figure that I noted in the previous slide. Looking forwards, to align with the IEA's net zero emissions scenario, green hydrogen capacity must grow by more than 100 times by 2030. So within their 8 years, we need to see production expand by 100 times. Let me take just a couple of minutes to look at some of the new ways that hydrogen is going to be used, particularly in the transport sector. The fuel cell technology, hydrogen fuel cells, very important. We're already seeing a focus on fuel cells in the heavy transport sector. It does emit a lot of CO2, and here is a solution to move down decarbonisation quickly with fuel cell trucks. And here are a few of the major providers already presenting those fuel cell trucks to the market. There are also hydrogen internal combustion engines. They have a role to play in the coming years too, because you can get an immediate reduction in CO2 emissions while the fuel cell technology develops. Hydrogen-powered trains are already a reality in Europe. Here we have trains in Germany and France that run on hydrogen fuel cells. Hydrogen-powered aircraft are not a reality, but Airbus has the ambition to bring to market a hydrogen-powered commercial aircraft by 2035. We already heard about sustainable aviation fuels this morning in the previous panel. SAF is the only viable way to decarbonise aviation, and that will be the case for quite a few years to come. So as we heard this morning, SAF is a real opportunity for the world sugar industry through that alcohol-to-jet route. Another use for hydrogen is in synfuels. They are synthetic hydrocarbons that need hydrogen to be manufactured, obviously. They can be a drop-in solution with existing fuels using existing logistics and distribution and refueling. Importantly, e-fuels drastically reduce the harmful emissions from internal combustion engines, and so can play a key role in decarbonising transport. But really, synfuels, e-fuels, compete directly with biofuels in the transport sector. And here, hydrogen for green steel manufacture. Iron and steel are a major contributor to CO2 emissions worldwide, and that's because they use a lot of coal. But green steel making is becoming a reality. Sweden's largest electrolyzer project has been inaugurated to produce green hydrogen for green steel manufacture. And the magic of hydrogen is that it makes the entire process carbon-free. By reacting hydrogen directly with iron ore, iron and water are produced instead of iron and CO2 when you use coal. But it's not all a fairy tale. There are some real challenges to pursuing hydrogen and green hydrogen in particular. I've listed a few on this slide, but in the time I have available, let's just quickly look at the cost of green hydrogen. That is the economics, and also a few comments about storage, distribution, and handling. Economics. Clean green hydrogen has always been far more expensive than its dirty counterparts. But that's about to change. The graph on the right-hand side shows production costs across 25 countries in 2023, as estimated by Bloomberg New Energy Finance. They're a reputed company. Look at the green. The green bars are lying way above the lines for blue hydrogen and grey hydrogen. That's today, in 2023. In terms of averages, grey hydrogen costs $2.13 a kilogram, blue hydrogen $3.10 a kilogram, and green hydrogen a whopping $6.40 a kilogram. By 2030, the situation will change. Green hydrogen has a good outlook in terms of economics. In Brazil, China, India, Spain, and Sweden, green hydrogen from new plants is going to start undercutting grey hydrogen from existing plants by the end of this decade. And that's because of a big drop in the cost of electrolyzers via economies of scale. And it's also because there's obviously supportive government policy will help development of the technology as well and the market for green hydrogen. Turning to hydrogen logistics and handling, most hydrogen today is actually used close to the point of its production. So not too much is actually transported. But looking forward, in a world where you need a lot more hydrogen, then you will need to develop a hydrogen storage, transport, and distribution network. And that will have to be on an international scale. So the low density of hydrogen by volume means it is difficult to transport and is generally converted into a different state to be moved around. The most widely used hydrogen storage forms are compressed hydrogen gas and liquid hydrogen, and they're usually transported by high-pressure vessels and cryogenic tanks. But chemical carriers allow hydrogen to be transported at high density and much more easily. I've already mentioned ammonia. Ammonia combines hydrogen gas with nitrogen gas, and it is a much safer and easier form of hydrogen to store and transport. Then there are liquid organic hydrogen carriers, LOHCs, and they are organic compounds that absorb and release hydrogen through chemical reactions. So LOHCs can be used as a storage medium for hydrogen and moved around easily. Importantly, ethanol. Ethanol is an effective LOHC, and I will come back to that in the later part of my presentation when I look at pathways for the sugar industry to get onto the hydrogen. There's also a technology using metal hydrides, which I don't really have time to get into today, but it's another way to move and store hydrogen. So let's come to sugar, the pointy end of my presentation. How can the world sugar industry take advantage and find a pathway to green H2? And when they do, will it be actually economic to do so? Now, this hydrogen opportunity, as we heard this morning, is in the context of an already abundant, significant number of ways that the sugar industry can produce green energy. Ethanol, biopower, biomethane, all the ways that we discussed in the previous panel. India's sugar industry is at the forefront of this desire to move into green hydrogen. They have already developed a technology model that they say can produce 1 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030. It's no wonder that India's sugar industry has its sights firmly on hydrogen when the government is so proactive in developing a hydrogen economy. The National Green Hydrogen Mission was approved by the Union Cabinet back early last year, and the mission outcomes by 2030 include development of a green hydrogen production capacity of at least 5 million tons a year. That's laudable and commendable. And to help achieve that, it's about investing in renewable energy capacity as well. The National Sugar Institute has worked in collaboration with a private company to build a demonstration plant which produces green hydrogen from compressed biogas. And that is produced from filter cake, as we also heard earlier. You then convert biomethane into green hydrogen and a solid carbon black, using pyrolysis technology. Methane pyrolysis uses heat to split methane into hydrogen and solid carbon, and as such, it does not emit any CO2. And that solid carbon can be used in other applications. But there are challenges to pyrolysis becoming fully commercialized, and I'll just mention them briefly. There's an issue with a high level of energy input required, issues with heat management. There's a real challenge in scaling up this into commercial scale. And then, of course, there's the whole question of economics. The cost of producing green hydrogen through methane pyrolysis, it has to be competitive with other hydrogen production methods. And you will get those economics if you can reduce the operational and capital costs of the pyrolysis technology. The world's other massive sugar industry, Brazil, like India, produces biogas using biodigesters. They use filter cake and they use bagasse from the ethanol process. And much of that biogas is presently used to boost biopower production from sugarcane bagasse. According to some people, it is possible to increase biopower generation by up to half if you use biogas from your filter mud and your bagasse. So even while Brazil is a biogas producer in the sugar industry, as far as the hydrogen opportunity goes, Brazil is taking a different approach. And they're focusing on ethanol as an effective hydrogen carrier. And that makes a lot of sense because you then have the existing ethanol distribution, transport, and filling station network already in place. You don't need to develop a new distribution network. So Brazil is testing the possibility to produce hydrogen directly from ethanol using an ionic membrane exchange technology. And this apparently is already working in a demonstration plant. It's a partnership between Shell, the University of Sao Paulo, Hydron, the firm that has developed the technology, and there's also government agencies involved. Talking with my good friends at Datagrow, they say that taking full advantage of the 42,000 ethanol fuel stations in Brazil, they estimate that the fuel efficiency of this process equates to around 35 kilometers a litre per litre of ethanol feedstock. The hydrogen produced under this project is going to be used in 3 fuel cell buses running around the campus of the University of Sao Paulo. And it's also going to be used by Toyota's first production car powered by a hydrogen fuel cell stack. So it's a really interesting approach to how to enter the hydrogen sector. The other obvious route for the sugar industry, particularly in the cane sugar industry, to produce hydrogen is to use your renewable but gas-generated electricity to power electrolyzers for the electrolysis of water. But for many industries, solar and wind could be the most cost-effective source of renewable energy. So you may not be competitive using this approach with your bagasse-generated electricity. Then there is hydrogen from cane bagasse through gasification or anaerobic digestion. But I hear this morning the big interest here in India is to use bagasse for second-gen ethanol. So this is not an obvious route. And as far as I'm aware, I don't think there's one industry in the world that currently produces biogas from bagasse. In Europe, which is the real leader in hydrogen, the beet sector is looking at biogas from beet pulp, but not to make hydrogen. Their incentive is to make biogas to put into their combined heat and power plants to decarbonize their factories. So I've been asked to finish up, and here I am finishing up. The global shift towards decarbonisation is accelerating, with clean hydrogen playing a pivotal role, green hydrogen in particular. Many challenges, but the benefits of a carbon-free economy are obviously clear, and it's a necessity to move towards decarbonisation. As I just said, India and Brazil are taking different approaches. India's approach with pyrolysis, the real challenge there is commercialisation and scaling up. In Brazil, with ethanol reform, the challenge is to move beyond the demonstration phase and prove that you can do this in a large scale using the existing ethanol distribution network. Using your renewable energy to produce hydrogen via electrolysis, the economics may not work. And for the beet sector, the incentive is to produce power for your beet factory rather than to produce hydrogen. So in the end, the hydrogen age is very much now. I want to finish by commending our hosts, the Government of India, and the sugar industry for taking this proactive stance on hydrogen. And it's good that the sugar industry has so deftly identified a pathway to get towards that hydrogen economy. So with that, let me say again, hydrogen, the hydrogen economy is not just a possibility, but it's an absolute necessity for the future of the world. Thank you.